In 1952, Boeing President William Allen spent $16 million, two-thirds of every dollar Boeing had made since World War II, on a prototype jet with no customers and no guarantee. Douglas looked at the same opportunity. Lockheed looked at it. Both passed. That aircraft became the Boeing 707, and the gap it opened never closed. Today, two companies build 99% of every large commercial jet on Earth. The story of how that happened is not about technology. To understand the duopoly, you have to understand what it costs to build a commercial aircraft before a single passenger ever boards. A new jet program costs $10 to $30 billion to develop. That's before production starts, before a single aircraft is delivered, and before the overruns hit, which they always do. The 747 cost Boeing $1.2 to $2 billion in 1960s dollars. The A380 was budgeted at 9.5 billion euros. By delivery, it had climbed toward 20 billion euros. The 787 has consumed $32 billion, and Boeing still hasn't broken even. These are not outliers. They are the baseline. Then comes certification. A type certificate, the legal approval to fly a commercial aircraft, requires the FAA to spend somewhere between 5 and 9 years evaluating the design. Over 200,000 hours of expert time went into certifying the Boeing 787-10 alone, alongside 4,645 hours of flight testing. Certification delays don't just cost time. They bleed cash and hand customers to competitors. Boeing planned to deliver the 787 in 2008. It arrived in 2011. Airbus bragged publicly that it sold more A330s after Boeing launched the 787 than before. 3 years of delay cost Boeing a market advantage it never fully recovered. Manufacturing is the third wall. A single Boeing 737 is assembled from roughly 2 million separate parts, supplied by approximately 700 companies across at least 24 countries. Titanium forgings from Italy, cabin seating from Japan, fuselage sections from Spirit Aerosystems in Kansas. Each of those suppliers has their own lead times, their own quality control, their own workforce problems. When any one of them fails, the entire production line slows. When the supply chain collapsed after COVID, 9 of the 15 major Boeing and Airbus suppliers told the GAO they couldn't fill orders. Both manufacturers fell behind delivery targets. Airlines waited. Every late delivery triggers penalty payments that eat directly into margins that were already razor thin. And then there are the engines, which the aircraft manufacturer doesn't even build. A single CFM LEAP 1B engine, the kind fitted on a Boeing 737 MAX, lists at $12 to $15 million each. The narrowbody gets 2. So before Boeing assembles a single fuselage panel, the engine bill alone is $24 to $30 million per aircraft. On wide-body jets, the numbers scale brutally. A Rolls-Royce Trent XWB powering an Airbus A350 costs approximately $25 million per unit. The GE90 family powering the Boeing 777 lists at $30 million. The GE9X, built for the 777X, runs over $70 million a copy. A 777 carries 2 engines. Emirates' 2015 contract for 200 Trent 900s, the A380 engine, priced each one at $45 million. The aircraft manufacturer sits downstream of the engine business and has no control over those costs. Add it all up: development, certification, parts, engines, tooling, factory infrastructure, and the only way to survive is to sell enough aircraft to push down the learning curve. Every doubling of production cuts manufacturing costs by a fixed percentage. The problem is that the entire global market for large jets is only about 1,000 aircraft per year. To recover development costs, a manufacturer typically needs to sell around 500 aircraft per program. Sell fewer, and the program destroys the company. Lockheed sold 250 L1011 TriStars and lost $2.5 billion, roughly $9 billion today. It never built another commercial jet. McDonnell Douglas couldn't fund new programs fast enough and sold itself to Boeing in 1997 for $13.3 billion. Between 1982 and today, 22 manufacturers have been driven out or absorbed. Boeing survived because the 367-8 prototype worked. The 707 entered service with Pan Am on October 26, 1958, and within a decade had made long-haul flight commercially viable for millions of passengers who had never flown before. Between 1970 and 2010, Boeing averaged just over 5% profit annually. Not 20%, not 30%. 5. That's what success looks like in this industry.
Europe watched all of this and concluded that no single country could challenge Boeing alone. In 1970, aerospace firms from France, Germany, Spain, and the United Kingdom pulled governments, engineers, and state capital into Airbus industry. The A300, launched in 1972, was the world's first twin-engine widebody. It sold 38 aircraft in its first 4 years. Then, oil prices spiked in 1979, and suddenly that efficient twin-engine widebody was the only aircraft in the world that made economic sense on crowded routes. Airbus went from 38 orders to 300 in a single year. It never looked back. What followed was a 50-year war of attrition in which every move one side made forced a billion-dollar countermove from the other. The A320 forced Boeing to update the 737. The 737 MAX forced Airbus to launch the A320neo. The 787 forced Airbus to build the A350, which they initially didn't want to do until Singapore Airlines rejected their first proposal and ordered 787s instead. Every generation of competition cost each company more than the last and made it harder for anyone without those accumulated decades of certification relationships, supplier networks, and production learning curves to enter the market. By 2003, Airbus surpassed Boeing in total market share for the first time. The duopoly was complete and sealed. China's COMAC has been trying to break it for 15 years. The C919 received Chinese certification in September 2022. It has over 1,200 announced orders. It looks, from the outside, like a challenger. The numbers are harder. COMAC delivered 13 C919s in 2024. In 2025, the target was 75, cut to 25 mid-year. The actual result was roughly 16. Boeing and Airbus each deliver more than 500 narrow-bodies annually. Every C919 order comes from Chinese state-owned entities. EASA, the European regulator, said in April 2025 that certification would not come before 2028 and could take another 3 to 6 years from that point. The FAA has said nothing encouraging at all. And the C919's CFM LEAP 1C engines come from a GE Safran joint venture. It's avionics from Honeywell and Collins Aerospace, both American. What China has built is a Western-supplied aircraft assembled in Shanghai, dependent on the same supply chains it's trying to displace. The barriers weren't built, they accumulated. Every failed program, every company that couldn't recoup development costs, every competitor that had to merge or exit, each one added another layer. Boeing and Airbus didn't lock the door. The economics of building jets did.